25 steps for playing Minecraft as Mojang intended. And even if you've already seen videos on this topic, stick around, because we dug deep into these guidebooks to find pieces of advice so crazy, we'd be the only ones stupid enough to try it. Starting with Mojang's advice on how to kill Elder Guardians. Apparently, the proper way to kill an Elder Guardian is that you would first use a fishing rod so that you pull them out of the water, and then you can kill them with your diamond sword. And sure, these Guardian mobs are a lot worse for wear when they're outside of water, but think about how many times you're gonna get blasted by their beam just trying to do this setup. I mean, for the Elder Guardians, you have to break them out of the monument to even try this. And with them providing the mining fatigue effect, that's gonna take some time. I'd rather just swig down a milk bucket and then take them on myself. After all, with 1.13 swimming, it's a lot easier to kill these things down in their main domain. What are the essentials when you need to go mining? Some might say torches, food, a pickaxe, obviously. But if you're Mojang, it's ladders. Yeah, no joke. Apparently you're supposed to bring a stack of ladders at all times, so that way you have a way to ascend to the surface quickly. And whoever wrote this clearly has a different definition of the word quickly, since the amount of time that it would take to make a perfect ladder right up to the surface winds up being significantly slower than just digging yourself a staircase out of there. And especially with the changes to the world generation since they wrote this, the world's a lot deeper. You're gonna need a lot more ladders to even try this out. Instead of finding shelter on your first day, Mojang would rather that you take all of the dirt around your spawn, build it up into a stack, so that you have a dirt pillar to mark your spawn coordinates. Which will be hard to miss, but there's one key flaw with this, which is that if you were to die and need to find back where you started, it's not gonna be hard. You spawn back at the world spawn, which would be right where you put the pillar anyway. All this does is add insult to injury. And for all that work, I'd rather spend that dirt to defend myself against the monsters at night. A dirt hut is a lot nicer for defense than just having a big pillar. Well, let's say you follow Mojang's advice and spend your first day building up this dirt pillar. Well, how would you spend your first night? According to Mojang, the solution is to spend it down in a cave. Since when you're down here, you won't need to spend time building a house. And if you need to, you can block off the walls and have a safe fort inside of the caves. Which I guess in some ways is true, but if you really think that the dark caves are gonna have less mobs than the dark floor above, you're sorely mistaken. And in that case, it's hard to say that this is any safer. If you find a cow in the plains biome, how do you kill it? Well, if you're using a sword, according to the exploration guide, you're doing that wrong. Since Mojang instead opts for using TNT, lava, or even cacti to kill mobs instead. Oh, and the real kicker, one of their suggestions for trying to kill passive mobs is to push them off a 24-block drop. I'm not sure they noticed the chickens are in the game, but that doesn't work too well for those. And for what it's worth, I also don't think you should be killing these with a sword. But that's because an axe can do the job so much better. But past that, none of these other methods are worth trying. And just like Mojang says you should kill passive mobs by pushing them off a cliff, they have the same advice for spiders. Except here, Mojang wants you to build up a pillar, and then when the spider climbs up, knock it off so it gets fall damage. Which, don't get me wrong, that does work. But unless you're really low on health, it's just gonna take way more time to build up that pillar and get rid of it after you're done. After all, it's not worth littering your server with these eyesore towers, just so that you can kill a few spiders. Any solution worth trying here can just be kept to the ground floor. Okay, this might just be the single best piece of advice that they give you in the whole thing, which is that when you're fighting a witch at night, Mojang wants you to attack it while it's healing. So all that time they're spending healing, they're not gonna be attacking you. So as long as we're able to damage them more than they're able to heal back up with a potion, this is our best opportunity to strike. So put that on the scoreboard, Mojang got one right. But even if they got that right, Mojang's way for killing Vexes might just take the cake for stupidity. Which sounds harsh, but let me explain. Since according to the book, the way you're supposed to kill Vexes is using lava. But you might find that challenging, given that Vexes are able to fly around and phase through blocks. Oh, and also, they take no damage from lava. Honestly, it baffles me that no one writing this book ever took the time to boot these up and try them for themselves. But hey, at least it's funny. According to Mojang, the best way to defend your base is to build a netherrack wall around it. Since as you can see from this example, they recommend that you not only use netherrack for your fireplaces, but also light fire to it on the wall's perimeter. And that'll be a way to deter enemies from your base. Which I get what they're going for. It does make your base look a little bit more intimidating, but to anyone with a water bucket, they're easily gonna be able to get through that. And honestly, this seems like more of a hazard for your base itself if it catches a blaze. Then it doesn't matter how many enemies you're scaring off, you don't have a house left anymore. But if a fire hazard isn't the way that you plan to decorate your base, then the exploration guide offers up this alternative. And according to this, you could instead build a perimeter around your base using stone slabs and iron bars. Which that can work, but it'll also make your house look like a prison yard. And honestly, having tall walls like this is just for show anyway, since you could do the same effect with just a couple of carpets and fences like this, and that'll always be my preference. While exploring the mine shafts down below, you're bound to come across a few of these cave spider spawners. But if you're breaking them, you're doing it wrong, at least according to Mojang. And instead, their advice would be to use torches on the cave spider spawners to disable them. Oh, and also bring a milk bucket in case you get poisoned. Which, like a lot of their advice, it does work, but I think they're making it into a bigger issue than it needs to be. I mean, the only reason to use torches on a spawner is if you want to keep it usable later on. But for one, cave spiders are such a tough mob to farm, and two is that you can get all the same spider drops by just building one of these mob farms, which is a lot more effective and a lot less of a pain to build. If you anger an enderman, don't worry, since apparently the course of action is to then trap an endermine inside of a minecart and then roll it past the enderman to lure them away. Except that requires way more steps than is necessary here. After all, why would you spend all that time to try and get the endermite and build a whole roller coaster system for it, when if you really needed to, you could just place down a water bucket at your feet and the enderman can't get close by. It's at least a lot cheaper to spend 3 iron ingots on a bucket than it was to spend 6 iron ingots on the rails to do this. As it's written, when you're exploring your world, you're apparently also supposed to be charting it out, and that includes filling out maps and marking signs to show where you've been. And then when you get lost by exploring, you're supposed to use a compass to help yourself get back. I guess that's if the dirt pillar doesn't work out from earlier. And while a lot of this advice feels unnecessary, I do have one suggestion for you to make it more worthwhile. That is, if you use that map to right-click a banner, then you don't need to leave a sign to mark where you've been, but instead you'll have this little area of interest marked on your map. And you can even name them, which I think looks a lot better than what Mojang's trying to have you do here. As Mojang puts it, if you're not building with purple wool and melons, you're doing it wrong. But to the rest of us that have eyes, it looks the other way around. Since the only advice given for the creative guidebook is that you try to choose blocks that are opposing on the color wheel. And for that matter, the purple and yellow-green of this melon are contrasting colors. But this advice neglects to mention that textures are also extremely important in building. And all that color blocking is gonna fall apart as soon as someone steps close to your build. So while there's a nugget of good advice in here, you gotta take it in context with the rest of it. Otherwise, you end up with this. And let's call that suboptimal. When preparing to go to the nether, you're apparently supposed to have a full set of enchanted diamond armor, which is a tall order, but that's not the toughest thing that Mojang wants you to get. Since before going to the nether, they recommend getting yourself a fire res potion. And the only issue with that is that the magma cream that we need to make this is only accessible in the nether. And that would seem like we're at something of a standstill. thumbnail. How do you prepare for the nether when the only ingredients they need are still left in the nether? And their other advice here is pretty good, like using snowballs to deal with the blazes. But if they want you to have magma cream, that's gonna be a sticking point. This structure you probably recognize from a thumbnail. That's because, as Mystery Ore shows off, Mojang asks that when you go to the nether, you're supposed to build this huge cobblestone structure occasionally to protect yourself. Literally in the diagram, they show Steve building 2 of these to help survive. And honestly, I don't know why a structure has to be this big when you can do the same job by just putting yourself in a hole like this. But hey, it'll be hard to miss on your way back, so I guess there's that. When you're getting ready to fight the Wither, Mojang says you should fight it in the nether, which not only seems a bit dangerous, but it also neglects to mention that netherrack has an extremely low blast resistance. So even if the Wither doesn't kill you, the falls into lava might. But don't worry, since also mentioned here is that you can use snow golems to help defend against the Wither. But how they got a snow golem to stay alive longer than a few seconds in the nether? That's a tall task. You can do this with a fire resistance potion, but it's really not worth it. And if you're gonna go through the effort to try and fight the Wither in an easy way, you might just be better off going into the end and spawning it underneath the portal. At least that requires a lot less snow. After you loot everything from another fortress, it turns out that what you're supposed to do is fortify it and make it into your own base. And folks, Mojang wants you to go the whole 9 yards, building these tall towers for defense, replacing the floors with glass and slabs so no mobs can spawn, and even adding iron golems to the nether bridges to help defend you, which definitely makes the nether fortress a lot more hospitable, but come on, we're still in the nether. That place will never be as safe as the overworld. But hey, with respawn anchors getting added in since this was written, it is a little bit more possible. But the real craziest part happens after you leave the nether fortress. Since on your way back to the portal, Mojang wants you to build a minecart system for a roller coaster. And while it definitely looks fun, building one of these out in the open is just a recipe for disaster. All it takes is one gassed fireball getting a little too close, and your whole roller coaster is going to be closed for maintenance. So really, if you want to do this, you should just break up to the nether roof and build it there. Or better yet, while you're up there, just build an ice highway. It's so much faster than minecarts will ever be. But of all of Mojang's crazy ideas for the nether, this one might take the cake. Or rather, bake the cake. Since as you can see from this example, Mojang wants you to go through the effort of moving cows and chickens into the nether, so that way you'll have a small bakery to craft up your cakes. And while I suppose that you could move over the cows and chickens necessary to do this, the simple truth is it's never going to be as easy to farm wheat in the nether as it is in the overworld. At least, you would think. But according to the guidebook, you're apparently able to use wet sponges to plant and grow crops inside of the nether. But obviously, Mojang missed the memo here, since not only does our water source instantly evaporate in the nether, but our sponges also instantly dry out. In fact, that's like the whole reason to bring a wet sponge into the nether. Who knows, maybe at some point this was actually a feature in the game, which could have been a cool way to have water inside of the nether, or at least a cooler way than have it inside of a cauldron, since that's never been helpful anyway. When it's time for you to finally fight the Ender Dragon, apparently the one thing you need to remember to bring is a full stack of obsidian. And why would you ever need that? Well, apparently it's a way to make panic shelters inside of the end. And while some part of that could help to defend you from the Enderman, the dragon just completely ignores these. So for all the time that it took to get an emergency stack of obsidian, it's all gonna be a waste when it shoots down one of the dragon's fireballs and just burns you alive in dragon's breath. And maybe there's a reason why speedrunners have never brought this to the end. It's just not necessary. Though, much like speedruns, Mojang does mention that you could use beds to kill the Ender Dragon. Hey, that part they got right, but the way they do it is not the best to say the least. According to the book, Mojang says you need to use at least 12 of the beds to just kill the dragon. And the way you're supposed to do it is place a bed on the floor, wait for it to swoop down, and then explode it when it comes nearby. Or you could do it the actual way that speedrunners do it, which is by going to the end portal, waiting for it to perch, and then one cycling it like this. Something tells me that's better. When your Elytra starts to break down, don't sweat it. Just go to your cow farm. Since according to this, the way that you repair your Elytra is with leather. And I'm sure you can tell that this feature was never actually added to the game, since the way that we actually do it is with phantom membrane, which is a shame. I would have much preferred to do this with leather. But hey, even if you have to kill a few phantoms to do this, that's still better than taking their advice of crafting 2 nearly damaged Elytras together. Unless you have a lot of luck with end ships, that's just not the best long-term investment. And much like we did in the nether, according to Mojang, once you've defeated the Ender Dragon, the only logical step is to turn the main end island into your base, complete by building farms, placing water fountains to deter Endermen, and even some iron golems to help out when those don't work. But while a lot of this seems pretty extra to do, I actually think that the lookout towers that they build here are pretty nice. I mean, they're better than just obsidian pillars. Everyone's got some of those. So if you're not going to transform the entire end like Sandiction, there's at least a couple of baby steps that you could take to improve your world. And with that, folks, YouTube thinks that you might like this video, so see if they're right and have a good one, alright?